Lieutenant Nathan Harris's office at the Denver Police Department was eerily quiet that Wednesday afternoon, save for the gentle hum of his computer and the occasional rustle of papers as he worked through a stack of case files. A fresh cup of coffee sat untouched, growing cold beside a framed photo of his family. Himself, his wife Amanda, and their daughter Sophie, all smiling at his promotion ceremony just last week. He reached for a new file, his wedding ring catching the light as he did so. When his phone buzzed against the desk's wooden surface, Sophie's face flashed on the screen, and a small smile tugged at his lips. His 16-year-old daughter rarely called during school hours, preferring to text instead. "Hey, sweetheart," he answered, already turning back to the case file. "Aren't you supposed to be in, Dad?" Sophie's voice came through in a harsh whisper that made him freeze. There was fear there, raw and unmistakable, but something else too. Anger. "Dad, come home now." Nathan sat up straight, his hand automatically reaching for his service weapon, a reflex born from years on the force. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" "No." She took a shaky breath. "Mom's in the bedroom with two men. This isn't the first time. You need to catch them." The words hit him like physical blows, each one landing with devastating precision. The room seemed to tilt sideways for a moment, and he gripped the edge of his desk until his knuckles turned white. 16 years of marriage to Amanda Parker flashed through his mind in a kaleidoscope of memories. Their first date at that little Italian restaurant downtown, their wedding day when she wore her grandmother's pearls, the night Sophie was born, and Amanda had looked at their daughter with such fierce love. How? His throat was suddenly dry. He cleared it and tried again, forcing himself to think like a cop rather than a husband. "How do you know they're in there?" "I came home early. Student council meeting was canceled." Sophie's voice dropped even lower. "I heard voices upstairs. Thought Mom was on the phone at first, but then I heard a man laughing. I went closer, and..." She choked back what sounded like a sob. "Dad, I recognized one of them. It's that developer guy from your promotion party, the one who kept talking about the downtown redevelopment project. Mark Delgado." The name materialized in Nathan's mind, along with an image of the man's too white smile and expensive suit. He'd been oddly interested in police procedures that night, asking detailed questions about evidence handling and internal investigations. "Stay in your room, sweetheart. Lock the door." Nathan was already on his feet, grabbing his jacket. "I'm on my way." "Hurry, Dad. They're talking about you. About ruining you." Those words sent a chill down his spine that had nothing to do with betrayal and everything to do with instinct. The same instinct that had kept him alive during his years working narcotics. This wasn't just about infidelity. There was something more sinister at play. He ended the call and immediately dialed another number, moving swiftly through the office. Officers nodded to him as he passed, unaware that their lieutenant's world was crumbling around him. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Sam Turner. "Sam, I need backup at my house. Possible 459 in progress." He kept his voice steady, using the code for burglary rather than explaining the truth. "Meet me there in 10. There was a pause, and Nathan could practically see his partner's frown. They'd worked together long enough for Sam to know when something was off. "You okay, man?" "No." Nathan pushed through the station's heavy doors into the parking lot. "But I will be." The drive home was a blur of traffic lights and horn blasts as he wove through Denver's afternoon traffic. His mind raced faster than his car, piecing together small details he'd dismissed over the past few months. Amanda's new yoga classes that ran unusually late. The mysterious text that made her smile when she thought he wasn't looking. The way she'd suddenly become interested in his cases, especially anything involving real estate or development deals. He thought about the Madison case. A wealthy businessman accused of murder, but the evidence had vanished before it could reach the DA's office. Nathan had spent months trying to track down the corrupt officer responsible, never imagining the trail might lead back to his own home. His hands tightened on the steering wheel as he remembered how Amanda had consoled him during that investigation, running her fingers through his hair as he worked late into the night, bringing him coffee and sympathy. Had she been laughing at him then, reporting back to Delgado about his progress? Rain began to fall, fat drops spattering against the windshield like tears. Denver's iconic weather, usually a comfortable constant, felt oppressive now. He flipped on his wipers, trying to clear his vision, both literally and figuratively. He needed to think straight to approach this like any other case. Evidence, witnesses, procedure. But this wasn't just any other case. This was his life, his family, his truth shattering into pieces. His phone buzzed again. A text from Sophie. They're still here. I can hear them moving around. Another buzz, Dad. I'm recording some of it on my phone. They keep talking about files and evidence. His daughter, thinking like a cop's kid, even in the middle of this nightmare. Pride mingled with heartache as he typed back one-handed. Good girl. Stay safe. Almost there. The residential streets of his neighborhood came into view, lined with blooming cherry trees that seemed to mock the darkness of the moment with their cheerful pink petals. His house, their house, stood at the end of the block, a two-story craftsman they'd bought when Sophie was still in elementary school. Amanda had fallen in love with the wraparound porch and the window seats where she said she'd read stories to their grandchildren someday. Sam's unmarked car was already parked a discreet distance away, and Nathan could see his partner's solid frame leaning against the driver's side door, waiting. They'd been through countless operations together, but nothing had prepared them for this. As Nathan pulled into the driveway, he saw movement at his daughter's window. Sophie's face appeared briefly, her features tight with anxiety, before disappearing behind the curtain. He took a deep breath, checked his service weapon, and stepped out into the rain. Sam approached, his expression grave. Want to tell me what's really going on? Yeah, Nathan said, watching water drip from the porch roof. But you're not going to believe it. The rain intensified as Nathan briefed Sam in hushed tones, their backs pressed against the garage door. Water ran down their faces like the tears neither man would acknowledge, and thunder rumbled in the distance, nature providing a soundtrack to the destruction of a family. Jesus Christ, Sam muttered when Nathan finished. His partner of 8 years ran a hand over his salt and pepper beard, a gesture Nathan had seen countless times during difficult cases. Mark Delgado, the same guy who's been all over the news about that downtown redevelopment, and his business partner, according to Sophie. Nathan checked his phone again, reading his daughter's latest text. Neil Harmon. The whole thing stinks, Nathan. Sam drew his weapon, checking it with practiced efficiency. 2 high-profile developers don't just happen to be having an affair with a lieutenant's wife. This is something else. Before Nathan could respond, the side door opened quietly, and Sophie slipped out. She was still in her school uniform, plaid skirt, and navy blazer with the St. Mary's crest. But her usual confident posture was gone, replaced by a tightly wound tension that made her look both younger and older than her 16 years. Sophie, Nathan started, but she cut him off, thrusting her phone toward him. I recorded some of it, she whispered, her voice shaking. Rain plastered her dark hair to her face, but she didn't seem to notice. They've been talking about ruining you, Dad. Something about the Madison case. And other things, too. Mom. Sophie swallowed hard. Mom's been telling them about your investigations. Sam took the phone, his expression darkening as he listened through one earbud. This is definitely admissible. Good work, kid. Sophie's laugh was bitter, so unlike her usual bright sound that it made Nathan's chest ache. Thanks. Years of your forensics camp finally paid off, Uncle Sam. A loud male laugh drifted down from the master bedroom window, followed by what sounded like breaking glass. Sophie flinched. Get in my car, Nathan told her, pressing his keys into her trembling hands. Lock the doors. If anything happens, if you see anyone besides me or Uncle Sam come out, you drive straight to the station and ask for Captain Monroe. Understand? She nodded, clutching the keys. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to say something else, but instead, she just hugged him fiercely and whispered, Get them, Dad. Nathan watched her sprint through the rain to his car before turning to Sam. Cover the back entrance. If they try to run, they won't get far. Sam's voice was grim. Partner, are you sure you want to do this? We could call for backup. Make it official. No. Nathan checked his weapon one final time. This needs to be me. They moved into position with the synchronization that came from years of working together. Sam disappeared around the back of the house, while Nathan approached the front door, his keys sliding into the lock as quietly as possible. The house was different somehow, still filled with familiar furniture and family photos, but it felt like a crime scene now. Every surface potentially holding evidence of betrayal. He could hear voices upstairs, growing clearer as he moved toward the staircase. Doesn't suspect anything, Amanda was saying, her laugh like broken glass in Nathan's ears. He's too busy with that warehouse investigation to notice. Speaking of investigations, a male voice, Delgado's, replied, "We need those files by Friday. The council votes next week, and we can't have any surprises." Nathan ascended the stairs silently, years of training taking over. Each step brought new sounds into focus. The rustle of clothing, the clink of glass against glass, murmured conversations about evidence and timelines that confirmed this was far more than an affair. Outside the master bedroom door, he paused. The same door he'd walked through countless times over 16 years of marriage. The door with Sophie's height marks penciled on the frame from when she was small enough to be measured there. Now it was just another barrier between him and the truth. To successful partnerships, another. Male voice proposed. Harmon, presumably. The sound of clinking glasses followed. Amanda's answering laugh was cut short by the crash of Nathan's boot against the door. "Police! Hands where I can see them." The scene that greeted him was like a twisted painting. Amanda perched on the edge of their bed in a silk robe, a champagne flute slipping from her fingers to shatter on the hardwood floor. Mart Delgado and Neil Harmon, both in various states of undress, reaching for clothes and phones. "Nathan, wait." Amanda's face had gone chalk white, her carefully applied makeup a mask that couldn't hide her shock. She stood, clutching her robe closed. "This isn't. Hands where I can see them," he repeated, his voice steady despite the roaring in his ears. "All of you. Now." Delgado recovered first, his developer's smile sliding into place like an expensive suit. "Now, Lieutenant Harris, let's be reasonable about this. There's no need. Up." Sam's voice came from the doorway as he entered, weapon trained on Harmon, who had been inching toward his discarded jacket. "Next person who moves gets to explain to the EMTs why they didn't follow a police officer's instructions." The room fell silent, except for the sound of rain against the windows and the distant rumble of thunder. Nathan could see his reflection in the mirror above the dresser. He looked exactly as he had that morning when he'd kissed Amanda goodbye, except for his eyes. Those belonged to a stranger. "Get dressed," he ordered, his tone professional despite the personal apocalypse unfolding before him. "Slowly. Keep your hands visible." As Delgado and Harmon complied, Amanda took a step toward him. "Nathan, please. You don't understand. This isn't what you think." "Really?" His laugh surprised even him with its harshness. "Because what I think is that my wife has been feeding information about active police investigations to two men while they were in my house. Please tell me what part of that I'm misunderstanding." Amanda flinched as if he'd struck her, but her chin came up in familiar defiance. "You have no idea what's really going on. If you just listen." "Oh, I've been listening." Nathan nodded towards Sophie's phone, which Sam had set to play on speaker. Amanda's voice filled the room, discussing evidence locations and case details with clinical precision. The color drained from her face as she recognized her own words. Her eyes darted to the window, to the men now fully dressed, to the door, calculating odds and angles like he'd seen suspects do countless times before. "You really want to add resisting arrest to everything else?" Sam asked mildly, noting her expression. "Arrest?" Delgado's smile widened, though it didn't reach his eyes. "On what charges exactly?" "Last I checked, adultery isn't a crime in Colorado." "No," Nathan agreed. "But conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and tampering with evidence are. Not to mention whatever we find when we start digging into that downtown redevelopment project you're so invested in." Something flickered in Delgado's eyes. Fear or anger. It was hard to tell, but it was Amanda who spoke, her voice taking on an edge Nathan had never heard before. "If you arrest them," she said slowly, "I'll tell Internal Affairs you've been accepting bribes. I have proof." The words hung in the air like smoke, poisonous and spreading. Sam stepped forward, his weapon still trained on Harmon. "Proof of what?" "The Madison case last year." Amanda's smile was a cruel parody of the one in their wedding photos. When certain evidence disappeared, I know where it went and who paid for it. To vanish. Nathan felt the trap closing around him, pieces clicking into place with terrible clarity. The missing evidence he'd been searching for, the dead ends in his investigation, the way some witnesses had suddenly changed their stories. It all led back to this room, to this moment. You're bluffing, Sam said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. Am I? Amanda's eyes never left Nathan's face. Should we find out? The rain continued to fall outside, washing away cherry blossoms and certainties alike. In the driveway, Sophie waited in the car, clutching her phone full of evidence. Somewhere in the city, files were hidden, and lies were waiting to be uncovered. And in this room, in this moment, everything Nathan had built his life around balanced on the edge of destruction. Your move, Lieutenant, Delgado said softly, straightening his tie with manicured fingers. What's it going to be? The next hour unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance of power and manipulation. Sam had called for a patrol car to escort Delgado and Harmon from the premises, but the familiar snap of handcuffs never came. Instead, the two men walked out under their own power, their expensive shoes clicking against the hardwood floors of Nathan's home like miniature thunderclaps. Nathan stood at the window, watching as the patrol car's lights painted his rain-slicked driveway in alternating red and blue. Sophie was still in his car, her face illuminated by her phone screen as she presumably backed up her recordings to her cloud storage, another trick she'd learned at Sam's forensics camp. The sight of her there, alone but unbowed, made his chest ache. She's quite the detective. Your daughter, Amanda said from behind him. She'd changed into a charcoal, gray pantsuit Nathan recognized from her real estate office, her mask of composure firmly back in place. Only the slight tremor in her hands as she lit a cigarette, a habit she'd supposedly quit years ago, betrayed her nervousness. Don't! Nathan's voice was granite. Don't talk about her. Sam paced the bedroom, his prosecutor's mind already building theories. The Madison case evidence. Start talking. Amanda took a long drag of her cigarette, the smoke curling around her like a shield. It's quite simple, really. Last year, when Robert Madison was arrested for the murder of his business partner, certain items were logged into evidence. A bloody shirt, some financial documents, a thumb drive. She tapped her cigarette against a crystal ashtray, a wedding gift from her mother. 3 days later, those items vanished. The official report suggested mishandling during transfer. I remember, Nathan said. I spent months trying to find the leak, and you never thought to look closer to home? Her laugh was bitter, coffee dark, and brewing. The evidence is in a safety deposit box at First Meridian Bank, along with documentation of every payment made to ensure its temporary misplacement. Sam's eyes narrowed. Payments to whom? That's the interesting part. Amanda moved to her dresser, opening a drawer to remove a thick manila envelope. The payments were made to an account registered to one Lieutenant Nathan Harris. The room's temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Nathan turned from the window, his face a study in controlled fury. You set me up. I protected you. Amanda's composure cracked slightly. You have no idea what they're capable of. What they would have done if I hadn't. If you hadn't what? Hadn't destroyed my career? Hadn't betrayed everything we built together? Built together? Now it was her turn to laugh, but the sound held no humor. You built your career, Nathan. I built a cage. The devoted cop's wife. Always understanding when you missed dinner. Never complaining when you worked weekends. Playing hostess at department functions and pretending I didn't have dreams of my own. Sam moved between them. The evidence, Amanda. The real story. Now! She sank onto the edge of the bed, their bed, and took another drag of her cigarette. It's all in here, she said, patting the manila envelope. Bank records, photographs, even a few creative email chains that show you coordinating with Madison's defense team. All perfectly fabricated. All completely damning. You expect us to believe Delgado went to all this trouble just to frame Nathan? Sam's skepticism was palpable. Believe what you want, Amanda said, standing and smoothing her slacks with one hand. But if you arrest Mark or Neil, this envelope goes to internal affairs. And trust me, they've laid the groundwork. There are people ready to swear they saw you taking payments, Nathan. Other evidence ready to surface about other cases you've handled. By the time they're done, you won't just lose your badge. You'll lose everything. The rain had stopped outside, leaving behind a heavy silence broken only by distant sirens and the soft tick of the bedside clock, an anniversary gift from 6 years ago. Nathan looked at his wife, really looked at her, searching for any trace of the woman he'd married. Instead, he saw a stranger wearing familiar skin. Why? The question escaped before he could stop it. Why help them destroy me? Something flickered in Amanda's eyes. Regret, perhaps, or just a reflection of the past. It's complicated. It always is with you. Nathan moved to the door, his decision made. Sam, call Captain Monroe. We need to. I wouldn't. Amanda's voice regained its edge. You make that call, and I make mine. How long do you think it will take Internal Affairs to execute a search warrant once they have this? She held up the envelope. How long before they freeze your accounts, suspend you pending investigation? And what happens to Sophie then? The mention of their daughter shifted something in the air. Nathan's hand, which had been reaching for his phone, stopped mid-motion. You wouldn't, he said, but uncertainty colored his tone. The woman standing before him was no longer the mother of his child. She was an opponent in a game he was only beginning to understand. Try me. Amanda's smile was all teeth. You arrest them, I destroy you. That's the deal. Take it or leave it. Sam stepped forward, his face thunderous. This isn't over. No, she agreed, crushing out her cigarette with precise movements. It's just beginning. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to make some calls. You can show yourselves out. Nathan felt Sam's hand on his shoulder, steering him toward the door, but his eyes remained locked on Amanda. She stood framed by their bedroom window, the last rays of evening sun catching her wedding ring. A ring that now felt like a handcuff binding him to whatever game she was playing. Dad! Sophie's voice from the hallway broke the spell. She stood there in her rain-dampened uniform, her phone clutched to her chest like a shield, looking far too young to be caught in this web of adult betrayals. Let's go, sweetheart. Nathan forced his voice to stay steady. We're done here. As they descended the stairs, Sam in front, Sophie between them, Nathan bringing up the rear. The sound of Amanda's heels on the hardwood followed them like gunshots. Each step took them further from the life they'd known that morning, towards something darker and more dangerous than any of them had imagined. Outside, the rain had left everything looking cleaner, fresher. But Nathan knew it was an illusion. Somewhere in the city, Mark Delgado was already plotting his next move. Evidence was being planted, stories coordinated, traps laid, and in the house behind them, Amanda was burning the last bridges to her old life, becoming something new and dangerous in the ashes. What now? Sophie asked as they reached the cars, her voice small but determined. Nathan looked at his partner, then at his daughter, seeing in both faces the same mix of concern and resolve. They were all he had left now, his real family, forged not in blood or marriage, but in truth and trust. Now, he said, we figure out what game they're really playing, and we find a way to win. The Denver sky, true to form, was already gathering new clouds, promising more rain to come. But for now, they stood in the fading light of day, three people united against whatever storm was brewing. The first strike had been delivered, the opening moves made. The only question was, who would survive the war to come? At Sam Turner's apartment, Nathan stared at the evidence spread across the kitchen table. 3 days had passed since the confrontation at his house, and he hadn't slept more than a few hours each night. Sophie sat beside him, her laptop open to a folder full of screenshots and recordings, while Sam made another pot of coffee, their fourth since dawn. Start from the beginning, Nathan said, rubbing his tired eyes. When did you first notice something was wrong? Sophie pulled up a calendar app on her computer. Remember that charity gala for the Police Benevolent Association 4 months ago? The one where Mom insisted on wearing her new blue dress. Nathan remembered. Amanda had been radiant that night, working the room with practiced ease. He'd been so proud watching her charm the city's elite, never suspecting she was playing a different game entirely. That's where she met them, Sophie continued, clicking through a series of photos she'd pulled from her mother's iPad. See? Here's Delgado introducing himself, and here's Harmon joining them later. Mom saved these to a hidden folder, but she didn't know I'd figured out her password months ago. Sam leaned over their shoulders, coffee forgotten. How did you know to look? She started changing after that night. Sophie's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she navigated through the files. More gym visits, new clothes, always checking her phone. Then I overheard her on the phone one night, talking about Dad's cases. She didn't use names, Sophie said, pulling up an audio file. Listen. Amanda's voice filled the small kitchen. Yes, I saw the files on his desk. The warehouse investigation is focused on the North Side properties. No, he doesn't suspect anything about the waterfront yet. I'll keep you posted. Nathan's knuckles whitened around his coffee mug. The warehouse investigation had been confidential, part of a larger probe into money laundering through real estate developments. He'd brought those files home to review, trusting his wife wouldn't betray that trust. There's more, Sophie said softly. Emails, text messages, meeting schedules. She'd delete them from her phone, but they'd still sync to her iPad. She was feeding them information about everything. Ongoing investigations, internal politics, even which officers might be susceptible to bribes. Sam took over, spreading out printouts of bank statements and property records. Delgado and Harmon have their fingers in every major development project in Denver. The waterfront deal alone is worth billions. But look at this. He pointed to a series of transactions. Shell companies within shell companies, all leading back to offshore accounts. They're laundering money through these developments, using inside information to stay one step ahead of investigations. And your wife is their inside source. Nathan stood abruptly, pacing the small kitchen. The morning light caught his wedding ring, and he resisted the urge to throw it through the window. Not just Mom, Sophie interjected. She pulled up another folder. They have other sources. Look at these emails. References to friends in the DA's office, the planning commission, even the mayor's office. It's a whole network. Nathan leaned against the counter, his detective's mind piecing together patterns. The charity gala wasn't a coincidence, was it? They chose us. Chose her. They did their homework, Sam confirmed, pulling out a dossier he'd compiled. Amanda's position at the real estate firm gave her cover for meeting developers. Your promotion to lieutenant put you in charge of major investigations. Sophie's private school connects you to half the power players in Denver. You were the perfect target. A knock at the door made them all freeze. Sam drew his weapon, moving silently to the peephole, then relaxed. It's Martinez. Captain Elena Martinez entered like a storm front, her dark suit as crisp as her expression. She took in the evidence-strewn table, the exhausted faces, the empty coffee cups, and sighed. Tell me you have something concrete. More than concrete, Sophie said, turning her laptop. I have proof they're planning something big with the waterfront project. Look at these emails. They're worried about someone named Thompson asking too many questions. Martinez's eyes narrowed. Councilman Thompson? He's heading the oversight committee on the waterfront development. And he's not the only one they're watching, Sam added, passing her a file. There's a journalist, Sarah Chun, who's been digging into their previous projects in other cities. They've got tabs on her too. Nathan watched Martinez page through the evidence, her expression growing darker. This is bigger than an affair or leaked information, she said finally. This is organized corruption on a scale we haven't seen before. And my wife is part of it, Nathan said, his voice raw. The question is, how willing a part? Sophie hesitated, then opened one final folder. There's something else you need to see, Dad. Something about how they really met Mom. A new silence settled over the apartment as fresh revelations emerged, each one adding another layer to the conspiracy they were uncovering. Outside, Denver was waking up, unaware that in this small kitchen, for people were pulling at threads that would eventually unravel the city's power structure. But for now, they were just beginning to understand the scope of what they faced. The affair had been just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath it lay a network of corruption and manipulation that had been years in the making. Sam refilled their coffee cups. The morning sun, now fully illuminating the evidence of betrayal, spread across his table. So, he said, What's our next move? Before Nathan could answer, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Meeting tonight. Riverfront Park. Come alone if you want to know the truth about your wife. Sophie, reading over his shoulder, gripped his arm. Dad, it's a trap. Of course it is, Nathan replied, showing the message to Martinez. But it's also an opportunity. Martinez nodded slowly. We'll need to be careful. If they realize how much we know, they'll bury everything, Sam finished, and probably us along with it. Nathan looked at his daughter, seeing not the child she'd been, but the ally she'd become. Sophie, I need you to stay with your aunt for a few days. Just until... No. She stood, her chin set in a familiar stubborn angle. I've been gathering evidence for months. I'm part of this now. Martinez studied the girl thoughtfully. She has a point. She's already proven herself valuable to the investigation. Investigation? Sam raised an eyebrow. Is that what this is now? It is if you want departmental resources, Martinez said. We do this by the book. Mostly. No cowboy tactics. No personal vendettas. She fixed Nathan with a stern look. Think you can handle that? Nathan looked at the evidence surrounding them. Proof of his wife's betrayal, of corruption at the highest levels, of a conspiracy that had targeted his family. By the book wasn't usually his style, but then again, nothing about this situation was usual. Yeah, he said finally. I can handle it. But first, we need to understand exactly what game they're playing and why they chose us, Sophie added softly, her fingers hovering over her laptop keyboard. There's still something we're missing. Something in Mom's old emails. The morning wore on as they dug deeper, each new piece of evidence revealing another layer of deception. The affair that had shattered Nathan's world 3 days ago now seemed almost quaint compared to the web of corruption they were uncovering. But they didn't know they were racing against time. In offices across Denver, phones were ringing, messages were being sent, and plans were being set in motion. The war was about to escalate in ways none of them could have predicted. The suspension notice arrived exactly 1 week after the confrontation at the house. Nathan had been expecting it. The anonymous tips to internal affairs about offshore accounts in his name were too well-crafted to ignore. But the reality of surrendering his badge and gun still felt like a physical blow. It's temporary, Martinez assured him in her office, the morning sun glinting off her nameplate. Just until the investigation clears you. If it clears me, Nathan corrected, placing his service weapon on her desk. The weight of his empty holster felt like a missing limb. They've done their homework, Captain. The accounts look real. The paper trail is perfect. Too perfect. Martinez tapped her computer screen, displaying bank records that traced a damning path of corruption. No dirty cop is this organized. They're trying too hard. Tell that to IA. Nathan stood by the window, watching officers in the parking lot below. His colleagues, his friends, now looking at him with suspicion in their eyes. Stevens actually smirked when he handed me the suspension papers. He's wanted to take me down since the Madison case. Stevens is an idiot, Sam said from his position by the door. He hadn't left Nathan's side since the suspension notice arrived. But he's a useful idiot. While IA focuses on you, we can. The office door burst open, cutting him off. Officer Sarah Chun, a rookie Nathan had mentored, stood there, her face ashen. Captain, you need to see this. Now! They followed her to the briefing room, where the morning news played on the wall-mounted TV. A reporter stood in front of City Hall, her expression grave. Breaking news in Denver this morning as Councilman Richard Thompson, head of the Waterfront Development Oversight Committee, was found dead in his home. Early reports suggest he took his own life, but sources close to the investigation say, my ass, Sam muttered, but Nathan barely heard him. His phone had buzzed with a text from Sophie. Dad, turn on the news. Mom just filed for divorce. She's demanding full custody. The hits kept coming, a 1-2 punch designed to stagger him. But it was the next news story that delivered the knockout blow. In related news, freelance journalist Sarah Chun, known for her investigative work into local development projects, was killed last night in what police are calling a robbery gone wrong. Chun had recently been working on a story about the controversial waterfront development. That's not possible, Officer Chun whispered. I just talked to her yesterday. She said she had proof of everyone out, Martinez ordered, her voice cutting through the shock. Except you three. She pointed to Nathan, Sam, and Officer Chun. Once the room cleared, she turned off the TV and locked the door. Talk, she commanded Chun. What did Sarah tell you? The young officer swallowed hard. She said she had documents linking Delgado's projects to similar developments in other cities. Something about a pattern of corruption and convenient accidents. The evidence? Sam pressed. She was supposed to send it to me last night. Chun's voice cracked. She never did. Nathan's phone buzzed again. Another text from Sophie. Dad, something's wrong. Two men in suits are watching our house. They've been there all morning. Before he could respond, Martinez's desk phone rang. The conversation was brief, but her expression said everything. Ballistics came back on the Chun shooting, she reported grimly. The bullets match your service weapon, Nathan. Sam exploded. That's impossible. His gun's been in evidence since the suspension. Not that gun, Martinez clarified. His backup piece. The one registered to him, personally. Nathan felt the trap tightening. The one I keep in my gun safe at home? The combination for only you and Amanda know, Sam finished. The pieces were falling into place with terrible precision. Thompson's death removing opposition to the waterfront project. Chun's silence before she could expose the pattern. And all evidence pointing to a disgraced cop with apparent financial motives and means. There's more, Martinez said, checking her computer. Your DNA was found at both scenes. And cell phone records place you in the vicinity during both incidents. They've been planning this for months, Nathan realized. Everything. The affair. The threats about the Madison case. Amanda's confession. It was all groundwork for this moment. But why? Chun asked. Why go to all this trouble to frame you? Because I was getting too close, Nathan said softly. The warehouse investigation, the financial audits. I was starting to see the pattern without realizing it. They needed me discredited before I could connect the dots. Sam's phone chimed with an alert. His face darkened as he read. They just issued a warrant for your arrest. Stevens is practically salivating. Martinez stood, her decision made. Officer Chun, you were never here. This conversation never happened. Clear. Chun nodded, understanding the gift of deniability she was being offered. Sam, get Nathan out of here. Use my car. It's in the basement garage. I'll stall Stevens as long as I can. And go where? Nathan asked, even as Sam was checking the hallway. They'll have my house watched, my accounts frozen. I know a place, Sam said. But first we need to get Sophie. If they're watching your... Nathan was already moving, his empty holster a reminder of how vulnerable they were. His phone buzzed one final time. Another text from Sophie. Dad, Mom's here. She's crying. Says she needs to tell me something important. Hurry. Martinez urged, gathering papers from her desk. I'll do what I can from here. A commotion in the hallway cut her off. Stephen's voice carried through the door. Lieutenant Harris, this is internal affairs. Come out with your hands up. Nathan met Sam's eyes, saw his own determination reflected there. They had one chance to get ahead of this, to protect Sophie and expose the truth. But first, they had to survive the next 5 minutes. Martinez pointed to her office window. Fire escape. I'll handle Stevens. As they slipped out onto the metal stairway, Nathan caught a last glimpse of his captain squaring her shoulders, preparing to face Stevens and buy them precious time. He silently promised to make it count. Your daughter first, Sam said as they descended. Then we figure out who our real friends are. Nathan nodded, his mind already racing ahead to the next moves in this deadly game. They'd framed him, threatened his family, and murdered innocent people to protect their secrets. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated Sophie. What they didn't know was that his daughter had been quietly building her own network of allies, gathering evidence they didn't know existed. Help was coming from an unexpected quarter. They just had to stay alive long enough to reach it. The safe house Sam had arranged turned out to be a converted industrial loft in the riverfront neighborhood, owned by his sister, who spent most of her time abroad. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Denver's skyline, but the thick curtains remained drawn. It had been 3 days since their escape from the police station. 3 days of watching news reports paint Nathan as a corrupt cop-turned-murderer. Sophie sat cross-legged on the leather sofa, her laptop surrounded by empty energy drink cans and takeout containers. She hadn't slept much since they'd barely managed to extract her from the house before Amanda could spring whatever trap she'd planned. Now, she was their lifeline to the digital world, monitoring police channels and following electronic breadcrumbs. "Someone's been trying to contact me," she announced, breaking the tense silence. "Through my school email. They say they have information about Mom and Delgado." Sam emerged from the kitchen, gun drawn. "Could be another trap." "No," Sophie said, turning her laptop to show them. "Look at the email signature. Carla Hurley, paralegal at Whitman Associates. That's Delgado's law firm." Nathan leaned in, reading the carefully worded message. "She wants to meet. Says she has documentation of similar operations in other cities." "It's not just Denver," a new voice said from the doorway. They all spun around. Sam's weapon snapped up, then slowly lowered as he recognized Elena Martinez. She wasn't alone. A woman in her early 30s stood beside the captain, her professional attire creased from hours of hiding in Martinez's car. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she clutched a thick leather briefcase like a shield. "Carla Hurley," Martinez introduced. "She came to my office an hour ago. What she has to say, you need to hear this." Sam secured the door, while Sophie cleared space at the dining table. Carla's hands shook slightly as she opened her briefcase, but her voice was steady. "I've been gathering evidence for months," she began, spreading out folders with methodical precision. "At first, I thought the patterns were coincidental. 3 other cities in the past 5 years: Seattle, Sacramento, San Diego. In each case, the same players, the same methods." She opened the first folder, revealing newspaper clippings and court documents. "They target police officers, specifically ones with wives in positions that give them access to the real estate or financial sectors. The wives are compromised, sometimes through affairs, sometimes blackmail. Then they use them to destroy their husbands when the investigations get too close." Nathan studied the documents, his detective's mind cataloging details. "The Thompson murder, Chun's death. They've done this before? Different names, same pattern." Carla pulled out more files. In Seattle, it was a city planning commissioner who had a fatal car accident. In Sacramento, a journalist died in a house fire. San Diego lost a deputy DA to an apparent self-harm. Each death cleared the way for major development projects. Each time, a decorated officer was framed for corruption and murder. Sophie leaned forward, her fingers flying over her keyboard. "The waterfront project, it's not just about money laundering, is it?" Carla's expression darkened. "It's about power, control. They're building a network in every major West Coast city. The developments are just cover for something bigger." "How did you figure it out?" Sam asked, his natural suspicion warring with hope. "I was assigned to handle document preparation for the waterfront project. Standard contracts, nothing unusual at first. But then I noticed discrepancies in the ownership structures, shell companies that didn't quite line up." She pulled out her phone, showing them a series of photos. "I started staying late, copying files when I could. That's when I overheard Delgado and Harmon discussing their plan for Lieutenant Harris." Martinez studied the woman carefully. "Why come forward now? Why risk everything?" "Because they murdered Sarah Chun," Carla said simply. "She was my friend. We met at yoga class last year, started having coffee together. She never knew I worked for Delgado, but she told me about her investigation. When I heard about her death," she swallowed hard, "I couldn't stay silent anymore." "The evidence you've gathered," Nathan pressed. "Is it enough to clear me? Maybe, combined with what your daughter has." Carla glanced at Sophie with something like admiration. "They didn't expect that, you know. In the other cities, they isolated their targets completely. But they didn't count on Sophie's technical skills or her loyalty." Sophie's laptop chimed with an alert. Her face paled as she read the screen. "Dad, they're making their move. Mom just gave an interview to Channel 8 News. She's telling them everything." The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Denver skyline, but the thick curtains remained drawn. It had been 3 days since their escape from the police station. 3 days of watching news reports paint Nathan as a corrupt cop-turned-murderer. Sophie sat cross-legged on the leather sofa, her laptop surrounded by empty energy drink cans and takeout containers. She hadn't slept much since they'd barely managed to extract her from the house before Amanda could spring whatever trap she'd planned. Now, she was their lifeline to the digital world, monitoring police channels and following electronic breadcrumbs. The offshore accounts, your supposed connection to Thompson's death, even suggesting you were abusive, Sophie said, scrolling through the latest news feed. Nathan felt the last pieces of his old life crumbling. The woman he'd loved for 16 years was systematically destroying him on live television. We need to move fast, Martinez said. Carla's evidence gives us a pattern, but we need concrete proof linking Delgado and Harmon to the murders. There might be a way, Carla said hesitantly. Delgado keeps detailed records of everything. It's like insurance against betrayal. Files, recordings, documentation of every operation. They're in his private office at the firm, which we can't get anywhere near, Sam pointed out. Every cop in Denver is looking for Nathan. Not every cop, Martinez corrected. She pulled out her phone, showing them a text message. I still have friends in the department. Good ones. Officers who don't believe the frame job. A slow smile spread across Sophie's face. And I have every email Mom ever deleted, every meeting she scheduled with Delgado and Harmon. If we cross-reference those with the pattern Carla found, we can prove they orchestrated everything, Nathan finished. The affairs, the murders, the frame-up. All of it. Carla nodded. But we have to move carefully. If they realize I've turned, she didn't need to finish the sentence. Sarah Chun's fate was warning enough. You'll need protection, Martinez said. Sam? Already on it, Sam replied, texting rapidly. I know some people who can keep her safe. Off the grid. Outside, the Denver sky was darkening with approaching rain. Through a gap in the curtains, Nathan could see the waterfront where Delgado's project was reshaping the city skyline. Somewhere in those gleaming towers of glass and steel, the evidence they needed was waiting. Okay, Nathan said, turning back to the group. Let's build a plan. He looked at Carla solemnly. Thank you for coming forward, for risking everything. She met his gaze steadily. Thank me when we take them down. All of them. Sophie was already creating a secure chat channel for them to communicate, while Sam and Martinez began mapping out security protocols. As the group bent over their work, Nathan felt something he hadn't experienced since this nightmare began. Hope. They had allies now. They had evidence. They had a chance. But in his gut, he knew the worst was yet to come. Delgado and his organization wouldn't go down without a fight. And somewhere across the city, Amanda was still playing her part in their deadly game. The war was far from over. In fact, it was about to enter its most dangerous phase. The conference room in the FBI's Denver field office hummed with tension as Nathan, Sam, Carla, and Sophie gathered around a table covered with surveillance photos and building plans. 2 weeks had passed since Carla's revelation about Delgado's pattern of corruption, and they'd spent every moment preparing for what came next. Special Agent Diana Walsh, a veteran of the Bureau's Public Corruption Unit, studied the blueprints of Delgado's waterfront office complex. The timing has to be perfect, she said, tapping a manicured nail against the paper. If he suspects it's a trap before we have concrete evidence, he'll destroy everything and disappear. Carla's right, Sam said grimly. He's done it before. Carla nodded, dark circles under her eyes testifying to sleepless nights spent documenting Delgado's operation, just like in Seattle and Sacramento. So we give him something he can't ignore, Sam suggested. Something that plays to his ego. And his paranoia, Sophie added from her workstation, where 3 laptops displayed various surveillance feeds. She'd spent the past week setting up a sophisticated monitoring system that would make most intelligence agencies envious. The bigger the threat seems, the more likely he is to act personally instead of sending someone else. Nathan watched his daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. She'd grown up too fast in these past weeks, her childhood innocence sacrificed to necessity. But there was no denying her capabilities had been crucial to their operation. What about this? Carla pulled up an email draft on her secure tablet, an anonymous tip to several news outlets about a secret grand jury investigation into the waterfront project, specifically mentioning possible RICO charges and cooperative witnesses. Walsh nodded. Slowly. That would get his attention. He's built his entire empire on keeping his hands clean, letting others take the fall. The threat of RICO charges would force him to act. We'll need more than just the tip, Sam cautioned. He'll verify through his sources in the courthouse. Sophie's fingers flew over her keyboard. Already on it. I can create digital traces of the grand jury documents. Just enough to show up if his people go looking, not enough to trigger any real clerk's attention. Your daughter's scary good at this, Walsh muttered to Nathan. You have no idea, he replied, but his attention was on the building plans. The real question is, where do we set the meeting? Carla pointed to a corner office on the 20th floor. His private conference room. He keeps sensitive documents in a hidden safe behind the east wall panel. That's where he'll go when he thinks he needs to destroy evidence. It's also where he takes meetings he doesn't want witnessed, Sam added grimly. Perfect place for dealing with threats. Walsh turned to Sophie. You're sure you can get cameras in there? Already have, Sophie replied with a smirk. Sophie pulled up a feed on one of her screens, showing the sleek conference room from 3 different angles. Planted them last week when the cleaning crew did their monthly deep clean. The feeds route through 4 different proxy servers before reaching us. Nathan studied the camera angles, his cop's instincts noting entry points and potential cover. We'll need a reason for him to call a meeting there specifically. Something that would make him feel in control. What about Amanda? Carla suggested quietly. The room fell silent. Nathan's ex-wife had been making regular appearances on local news, painting him as a corrupt cop who'd threatened her in his silence for years. Her performances were convincing. Too convincing for comfort. She's still reporting everything to him, Sophie said, her voice hard. I've been monitoring her communications. She tells him every time someone from the department reaches out to her. Every rumor she hears. Then we use that, Walsh decided. We let her discover something about the grand jury investigation. Something she'll think proves her loyalty when she reports it. She'll want to deliver the information in person, Carla added. She always does with important intel. Says she doesn't trust phones. Sam leaned forward, his expression concerned. You sure about this, partner? Using her as bait. Nathan remembered the look in Amanda's eyes when she'd threatened him with the Madison case evidence. The cold calculation that had replaced 16 years of love. She made her choice, he said finally. Now we use it against them. Sophie pulled up another window on her center screen. I can fabricate some evidence trails that would look legitimate to Mom, but actually lead nowhere. Make her think she's found something crucial. Do it, Walsh ordered. But remember, we need Delgado on camera explicitly ordering a hit or admitting to the previous murders. Anything less, and his lawyers will tear it apart. There's something else, Carla said hesitantly. Something I haven't mentioned yet. She reached in her briefcase and withdrew a small recorder. Last month, before I came to you, I was in his office late one night. He was there with Harmon, drinking and celebrating the Thompson death. I managed to record part of their conversation. The recorder held only fragments, too broken and muffled to use in court, but it confirmed their suspicions. Delgado and Harmon had orchestrated everything, using a network of corrupted officials and compromised spouses to build their empire. This is how we nail him, Walsh said after listening. We make him think there's another recording out there. Something clear enough to destroy him. He'll want to handle it personally. The plan came together over the next hour. Leak the grand jury's story, plant evidence of a damaging recording, let Amanda discover it, and wait for Delgado to spring their trap. Each step was carefully choreographed, every contingency considered. One thing bothers me, Sam said as they wrapped up. What if Amanda knows more than we think? What if she's playing her own game? Nathan watched Sophie programming the last of her digital breadcrumbs. Then we adapt. That's what cops do. Speaking of adapting, Walsh interjected. All our surveillance shows Delgado's been meeting regularly with Judge Harrison, the one who signed the warrants for your arrest. If he suspects anything, he won't, Carla assured them. I've worked for him for 3 years. When he feels threatened, he gets tunnel vision. He'll be so focused on containing the grand jury leak, he won't see what's really happening. They spent another hour refining details before Walsh called it a night. As the others filed out, Nathan remained at the table, staring at surveillance photos of the man who'd systematically destroyed his life. Dad! Sophie stood in the doorway, her laptop bag slung over one shoulder. "You okay?" He managed to smile for her benefit. "Just thinking about Karma. Karma needs help sometimes," she replied with a wisdom beyond her years. "That's why we're here." The next day, their plan began. News outlets received anonymous tips about the grand jury investigation. Digital traces appeared in courthouse computers. Amanda's sources began feeding her carefully crafted information. And in his waterfront office, Perry Delgado received the first whispers of a threat to everything he'd built. Just as planned, he moved to eliminate it, not knowing that this time his target was ready. The trap was set. Now they just had to survive what came next. Amanda Harris sat in her parked car outside Delgado's office building, her manicured nails drumming in anxious rhythm on the steering wheel. The USB drive in her purse felt like a live grenade, its contents potentially devastating to everyone involved. She'd found the files buried in an encrypted folder on an old backup drive, supposedly dating from before her separation from Nathan. Email chains, voice recordings, calendar entries, all pointing to a massive conspiracy centered around the waterfront project. And now, with rumors of a grand jury investigation swirling, the timing couldn't be worse. Her phone buzzed, a text from Delgado demanding an update. She'd been sitting here for 20 minutes, wrestling with decisions she thought were already made. The weight of recent events, Thompson's death, the journalist's murder, pressed down on her like physical things. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she whispered to her reflection in the rearview mirror. The face that looked back was perfectly made up, but her eyes held shadows that no concealer could hide. The elevator ride to the 20th floor gave her time to compose herself, to remember why she'd made the choices that led here. Delgado had saved her when she'd been desperate, helped her escape the cage of being a cop's wife. The fact that he'd used that escape to destroy Nathan was just business, nothing personal. But as she approached his private conference room, another memory surfaced. Sophie's face the last time she'd seen her daughter, full of hurt and betrayal. "How could you, Mom?" she'd asked. "How could you help them do this to Dad?" The conference room door opened before she could.